Amahiluch, good morning. Next slide, please. I'd just like to welcome everyone to this the workshop, the serving rural and remote communities and co-developing place-based climate resilient solutions. So as I said, my name is Hetkum Get. My government name is Brett Hewson. I'm Git Sun from the Northwest Interior of what's called British Columbia. I'm an author and a knowledge carrier, and I'm also a research associate with the Prairie Climate Center at the University of Winnipeg. I just wanted to kind of open up to talk a little bit about the purpose of the project. For this project, we're here to share about the PIC-STEAM partnership project, link it with BC First Nations climate strategy and action plan, and engage feedback and interest on the co-development approach and community partnership opportunities. And kind of in addition, a little bit further to this, you know, with well over 10,000 years of adaptation experience, Indigenous communities have much to offer regarding adaptation and mitigation research. So in particular, talking about the experience that our impacts, firsthand, we experience the impacts of climate change firsthand. And also we've been through the industrialization of the lands. So this PIC-STEAM's partnership project seeks to engage the communities and community partnerships with BC First Nations to co-develop a climate action strategy that takes into account the values of community cultures and knowledge systems. But also the project aims to connect BC First Nations climate strategy and action plan while encouraging the feedback and a more collaborative approach. So just kind of thinking about going beyond, you know, housing is incredibly important. It is an important part of resiliency, but also looking at it from a cultural context. So we have opportunities here with a lot of knowledgeable people online currently to be able to engage in a more in-depth way. And I'll pass it over to Ian, who'll be able to kind of elaborate more on the pathway of the project.
And so, yeah, thank you, Brett, and thank you everyone for being here. So we are happy to be a supporter of this project. So PICS has put in $1 million into this kind of collaboration, and with a real emphasis on rural and remote communities, which we know make up the vast majority of the province and yet are often underserved. There's a lot of urban activity on climate change, and we're trying to change that. And Nancy Alleweiler, David, and some of the kind of researchers and the different partners here have really kind of brought a project together that helps kind of serve these needs. In terms of the workshop details, this has been kind of sent around in terms of how to join. We're all here. The specific kind of things that we're trying to get at in terms of building these kinds of partnerships, and the types of things that are being considered in terms of how these partnerships can be formed. So that's been circulated. You should have that. This is the team of people that are on the call right now. So I won't kind of give every name, but you can see the faces here. And these are the folks that brought this proposal to PICS and said, this is an important idea. These are the kinds of partnerships and community connections that we need to kind of push, you know, a good kind of collaborative approach that builds these solutions that we all want to see in full partnership with Indigenous and First Nation communities. And so these are the folks that will help facilitate today. And so maybe everybody there kind of give a wave who's on the slide, and you'll see them in the breakout sessions as we kind of move forward. And that idea of co-development and collaboration, right? That is what PICS kind of stands for. We're really interested in supporting projects that bring research together in meaningful ways, in really co-developed ways with community partnerships. And so today is really about kind of trying to scope some of the critical issues and priorities for communities with the people on the call. And it's about listening, learning, and building a foundation for working together. That's the purpose of today. This is not a formal research process right now. This is that kind of initial relationship building. And, you know, future research will emerge from this, but the video that's being recorded right now, it's not an official kind of research process. It's about, you know, listening, learning, and building that foundation for collaboration. And over to Brett. You're muted, Brett.
Sorry, I forgot about that. All right, now I'd like to introduce you to someone that I've had the opportunity of working with in the last few years. Her name is Patricia Rojas, and she is a regional climate coordinator for BCAFN. She has worked for over 15 years with Indigenous peoples, focusing on the protection of collaborative rights, social and environmental justice, and self-determination. So thank you, Patricia, for joining us, and I'll hand it over to her. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad, and good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Patricia Rojas. I am the Regional Climate Change Coordinator for the BC Assembly of First Nations. And thanks to Esther Whelan for starting us with in a good way. That song was very beautiful. So yeah, I will start my presentation sharing my screen here. And please let me know if there is any problem. And I will start. So I will be, thank you. First, thank you to the First Nations Housing and Infrastructure Council for inviting me to present the strategy today and share some of the main points of the strategy that is connected with this very interesting project. So the BC First Nations Climate Strategy and an action plan is a province-wide strategy that we started its development in 2019. So why a First Nations specific and province-wide climate strategy and action plan? I am still remember back in 2019, it was in Marriott when First Nations leadership gathered at a Special Chiefs Assembly, BCFN Special Chiefs Assembly. And they discussed many of the issues that First Nations in BC face when with climate change. So one of the things that they mentioned is that we are in a multi-global crisis. Of course, we have the climate emergency, which is one of the more urgent, but we also have a biodiversity crisis that we, it's very clear. First Nations know more than anyone on this. We also have an environmental crisis, and it's not just the climate, it's also the environmental degradation that we are facing because the way how we developed. And also, of course, economic crisis, and we have other crises like the pandemic and many other more. So, and of course, Indigenous people, not just in BC, around the world, are disproportionately impacted by this climate crisis. And from all the climate-related events we witnessed, all the fires and the heat domes and many other things like those climate-related events, but also the slows and climate-related events that happen in communities. Nations also discuss how they see climate change, how they see the roots of climate change. And that represents in a different way how others, non-First Nations, talk about the climate crisis. So I remember, and that's also some quotes that are coming from some of the leaders, and that climate crisis are a reflection of values and the way how we live. And of course, it's coming from the colonial behaviors that increase disconnection with the land, nature, and each other. At that meeting, they also discussed, and that was very present, because the Clean BC was released in 2018, and nations were they raised their concern because the plan was developed without First Nations, without a meaningful participation of First Nations, very similar to the Pan-Canadian framework. That's the big plan at the federal level. Nations are also facing the legacy of colonization, and it's also shaping the reality of nations and how they face climate change. So there are still historical injustice and losses and systemic and structural violence, racism and oppression as well. But nations are not just victims. Particularly here in BC, there are many communities, governments that are already working to address climate change. They have amazing projects. So there are like, it's impossible to count. It's impossible. We try to track some, climate related projects in communities, and it's just impossible. We have 204 First Nations, and everyone in different scales. They are doing lots of work in adaptation and also mitigation. And of course, we are in a unique context of reconciliation, what people call reconciliations, and nations of First Nations and leaders were fighting or are fighting for the recognition of their inherent rights. And it's in 2019, the pass of the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People Act, known as the Declaration Act, was a big event here in BC and now in Canada with the passing as well. So we are in a specific context. So the First Nations leadership mandate the First Nations Leadership Council to develop this strategy in 2019. And we started the work back then. We have 4 phases, or the strategy was developed in 4 phases. We also have an advisory group that guided the development of the strategy. We engaged the nations in different ways. The first was the climate surveys. The results of the climate surveys are very interesting, and they are in our website, the BCFN website. And we have more than 139 First Nations and tribal councils that fill out this strategy. So we also have engagement sessions. We have a survey for First Nations organizations, and as I said, the specific engagement sessions. Of course, there were challenges. The pandemic started in 2020, and also all the climate-related events that we faced during those times. So an overview of this climate strategy. So the strategy has a vision that we can see here on the screen. There are also specific visions for youth, from the north, the interior, and the coastal. And the strategy has ended up with 4 pathways for climate action: inherent titles and rights, capacity and leadership, land and water protection, and climate response and preparedness. So from those pathways, we also have a set of objectives, themes, actions, and strategies, and recommendations for each one, like recommendations for implementation. And in total, we had 27 themes, 63 objectives, 143 strategic actions. And we summarize those strategic actions, in 20 urgent calls for climate action. So those are the urgent 20 calls for climate action. I will just talk a little bit in some of those that are related to this project that we will be discussing today. So the first one is the IPC recommendations, and that's related to the reduction of the urgency to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and to prepare to climate change. The strategy calls to the government to improve efforts and everyone to work together to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Also review and reform legislations, regulations, policy programs, and frameworks to address barriers, impacts, and limitations on asserting First Nations title rights, treaty rights, and inherent jurisdiction. So this strategy is a right-based strategy, and inherent rights are this pathway or the pathway of inherent title, inherent treaty rights are like the foundation of the strategy. So nations said, like, without recognizing this and implementing those rights, we can't we cannot address climate change in the way how indigenous people see that climate crisis. So Pathway 7, empower First Nations youth, and the idea is to support youth to be part of the of climate action, and we ask for training, mentorship, creation of advocacy opportunities, and increased representation of youth in state-led climate actions and other processes as well. So building long-term climate capacity, that's something is also very crucial. And the idea is to work collaboratively with governments and others to ensure First Nations in BC are empowered and prepared for the climate crisis. And this includes some education and training, climate capacity building to secure climate funds as well. Strengthen emergency management, response and recovery. Something is related to this project is identifying and implementing critical supports and infrastructure required to reduce risks and vulnerabilities. And support First Nations in developing environmental, sustainable and low carbon economy. The idea with this is also how we can support nations in their own, to develop their own projects in their own way, following their own vision as well, that economically sustainable. Ensure access to clean and safe food and water. Yeah, that's very important. It's not totally related with this project, but it's also something that we discuss as part of the 20 climate calls to action, and support nation-specific climate strategies. That's also very important, how to provide the tools and funding research to First Nations to develop their own community-specific climate-related strategies and plans. Support First Nations in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We talk a little bit, or I talk a little bit about this, and this is very related to this project, is how to identify needs that are related to infrastructure, particularly in housing and buildings. And we want for this specific action, we have those are the objectives that are looking, the strategy is proposing and is ensure that housing and buildings within First Nations are culturally appropriate, energy efficient and resilient to climate change, and address the systemic inequity of housing security for First Nations as well, and strengthen First Nations management capacity to build homes and buildings in their own self-determined ways. I think those are very important for this project. So the next, and that's my last slide. Check here. Yes, we know that that's the implementation of this strategy, and we know the climate change is an urgent threat and transcends jurisdiction boundaries, making collaboration and partnership very essential. And we know that it's an urgent, oh, sorry, it's repeating there. There is a mistake in this slide. So this urgency requires true engagements, collaboration and partnerships between titles and right holders, First Nations organizations, and government, academia, private sector, civil society. And I think that's this project is a very specific example of how we can collaborate, how we can work together, how we can build those partnerships. And of course, whoever comes to the nations to look for partnerships, including our First Nations organizations, we need to be prepared to recognize First Nations inherent rights. And also, it's very, very important that the harms of colonization must be acknowledged and addressed, and as an essential component of developing accountable relations for climate action. So that's also very important. And yeah, That's my presentation, message, and I'm happy to answer any question if there is any. Thank you.
We'll certainly have lots of time to kind of jump into conversation in the breakout rooms. And so thank you, Patricia, for that wonderful conversation and important framing for today. So maybe we'll pass it over to Nancy to kind of pick up on that thread.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to see in our boxes, everyone here. Thank you so much to Nikki and Michael and First Nations Housing Infrastructure Council for making all this happen. I'm Nancy O'Weiler. I'm the principal investigator of the grant, and I'm here today to simply acknowledge what we are doing to introduce, or attempting to do, to introduce you to the themes and to start a process that we hope will be a longer term engagement with many and all of you in some way. And the first thing I want to do is to follow up on Patricia's and the First Nations Climate Strategy and Action Plan. Excellent, wonderful stuff in there. And say that we are using that as a foundation in what we are trying to do and working with communities, respecting all of the good things in there. We can't do everything, as Patricia's intimated. We're focusing on housing and technical energy systems because that is our expertise with all of our research partners. But very much trying to bring this into a holistic framework. So we are, most respectfully acknowledging all this and want to uphold all of the traditions and the values, including the OCAP principles in terms of data management. So you can hold us to task for that. Our goal is to combine our knowledge from the research team with the knowledge, the experience, and the living with climate change that happens in your communities. So we are hoping, and our goal is to include and combine Indigenous and local knowledge with Western science. We are going to be trying to collect data that we can share more broadly and inform and enlighten. And as Patricia and others have said, there are already identified barriers, but also enablers. Where are the stumbling blocks? Where can we overcome those? How can we, working together, accelerate what intentions are already out there in various policies? And so part of this is to build and support plans for climate resilience in buildings and energy systems, and also to take our combined knowledge and start having an impact on actual policy, on access to funding, on access to changing standards, to allowing things to be built that are not going to be as vulnerable to climate change. So the specifics of our project, it is a 4-year project. We have $1 million over the 4 years, so roughly divided into 4, divide $1 million by 4. Under the PICS agreement, 50% of the funding goes to student skill development, research support, knowledge development. And I just want to take a minute to explain that. It doesn't mean, one of our hopes is that we will be working with students who can support your communities, support some of the activities, and thus link to what Patricia was talking about in terms of skills development for youth. These students will come from BC universities, the 4 universities that is part of the PICS program, but we hope to include and embed students in some of these communities so their research, your needs are combined. And ideally, we would love to be working with Indigenous students from our universities, from the universities who can do that. So the student support is very foundational, but it is core to the research. The other part of the funding potential is open-ended. We have not allocated any funding, and that right now, this is the beginning of our discussion and consultation, but these can be for many, perhaps some small projects, honoraria, mobilization, meetings such as this, outreach in other forms. So we very much want to co-develop that with our community. We have two tranches in what we're thinking of in terms of the development of this research and this outreach and this engagement process. One is to identify a number of 3 to 5. We picked that number of communities in rural and remote BC to work more in depth with on co-developing strategies, understanding the needs, trying to work together to move forward on these important initiatives. So that's one of the avenues. The second is to more broadly reach out, reflect, combine our knowledge, share our knowledge, work together in a broader sense. So coming back to communities in workshops like this or other forms to be able to say, this is what we're learning. Does that resonate with your community? Are there things we're missing? And then combine those learnings from our more in-depth to work with the broader not consultation, but working together. We also, through our own research team and through your connections and your work, want to, and we will align with other things going on. Ian and PICS are working on many different initiatives. The First Nation climate initiatives that Patricia talked about, again, wonderful foundation. Connection to government. I just listed a couple of the ongoing policies and strategies, which are works in progress, some a little farther along, some not so far along. As Patricia mentioned, Clean BC did not have sufficient engagement and consultation. And the other policies, such as the Disaster and Climate Risk and Resilience Assessment, is supposed to do more. ECCC is the federal environment ministry. They are funding data initiatives, of which we would like to impart our data, because it's not just about numbers, it's about stories, it's about real experiences, to bring that to everyone's attention. And then there are other research institutes that we can link with to share our expertise. So just in a very quick overview, there are phases that we're envisioning. These are flexible with our co-development partners and your responses to go forward. Right now we're in phase 1, reaching out, seeking partners, co-developing, engagement, how to go forward. But when we move in from that into some of the specifics, I just wanted to point out some of the skills and the things that we bring. So co-developing methodologies that are merging the two-eyed seeing, the two-leg walking, Western science, local knowledge. Dave Bristol's going to be talking to you in a minute about risk assessment. We have people with expertise in that, but bringing risk down from the mechanical, this is some number probability, to how does it affect me? What are the measures that I put in terms of the risk seeing my community and communicating that risk? Core capabilities that vary by region, by household, depending on the circumstances, the climate risks, other factors. State of housing, state of technical systems. Our partners at BC Housing and Technical Safety BC are already engaged in this. How can their processes and your knowledge be combined to elevate the wisdom and the needs? And then identifying policy barriers, of which that's the world I work in, of which there are many. And how do we overcome them? What are the ways we can enable moving forward more quickly? A lot of these things are in process, but they're not moving fast enough. So as I said, we hope to have ongoing workshops, sharing circles, webinars, whatever works, to work together to communicate this, both our in-depth work with some communities, but broader outreach to others, and then link these to our own ways of communication. So this is just a sample of the kind of deliverables that I hope we hope this project will bring. So in the short term, there may be some quick adjustments that can be made. funding envelopes that exclude communities because of timing or barriers such as you have to have a really big project to qualify and all I want is a small amount of money to get going, or I need the capacity to help me get into this program. Targeted funding, as I've suggested, low carbon, combining mitigation and adaptation into housing projects and so on. I'm not going to read all these, but you can see the flavor of them, moving our knowledge together to ultimately make change. So the opportunities and our commitment to you, we do want to reflect the different regions of BC. 95% of BC is rural. 95% of BC are First Nations. So, by focusing not just on the big cities or not focusing on the rural and remote communities, we are missing the vast amount of the province and affecting a lot of people. So we are looking to work with communities that do represent the challenges, the capacity, the different designs, and different ranges of climate risks. Connecting Western science, Indigenous knowledge, respecting First Nations rights and titles, respecting data gathering, and to develop a relationship that will go 4 years, and we hope beyond.
$1
And as
million between how many reserves? $1 million ain't nothing. Howdies.
I can hear you in the background, and $1 million doesn't go very far, and I agree. But we're doing what we can. It's a start, and we can't do everything. But also remember that starting creates other partners. So one of the hopes is that as this project gets going, we may have other partners come in with their funding as well. So that's my story, and thank you for interjecting and pointing out the obvious, that we're not coming with buckets and buckets of money, but we're coming with expertise to share with your expertise. And all of us on the project are working together with our time and our energy to work with you to do what we can. So thank you. And I want to turn it now over to Dave Bristol to talk a bit more about measuring climate risks.
You're muted, Dave.
I did the exact same thing in our dry run. Apologies. Anyways, I was saying thank you to all of the previous presenters and to all of the participants here today. In a moment, we're going to be moving on into breakout rooms to start conversing in a more back and forth format. And what I'm going to talk about here very briefly is just a bit about how we think in part about climate risks. So we've been thinking in terms of impacts, what impacts are caused for what reasons, why some impacts happen and others don't, what impacts lead to other impacts. So here's just one way that we've been thinking about climate risks. So let's say we are having a season where there's a higher need for cooling in buildings. So a building or a house or a home starts to get uncomfortable, potentially even unsafe. So maybe somebody thinks about installing an in-room cooling system and they turn it on in their building. What cooling system they install and run and how they run it and so forth will involve budgetary considerations, installation considerations, expertise considerations. In rare situations, the type of system that's installed can reduce the pressure in a home and pull exhaust from a pilot light in an adjacent piece of equipment into the home. And that can lead to perhaps an unsafe buildup of carbon monoxide, a very dangerous gas for humans to breathe in. Now I say this is rare. It depends on a certain combination of technologies and a certain situation of housing and so forth. Ultimately, regulations have a big part to play in making certain technology combinations even possible across the province. And of course, what happens next if a situation like this arises depends on yet further situation or further specifics. How does the owner respond or behave? What's the local knowledge about these types of situations? And of course, are there other regulations about alarms being present or things like that? So we've been discussing how climate risk, and if we want to be more optimistic about it, climate resilience results from an intersection of the environment, regulations, and community, and all the myriad factors that are behind these three words that I can't do justice to in this brief presentation. But this is just one high-level view of climate resilience. And as Nancy and others have mentioned, we're really seeking to work together to expand understanding and to help address rural and remote community climate resilience. So what we're going to do next today in our session is we're going to show a couple of polls that are going to ask questions about climate hazards and other hazards that might be of concern in your community. And then we'll use the polls and sort of the group-wide results of the polls to help initiate discussion in the breakout rooms that we're going to then have afterwards. As part of this process of trying to start to build an understanding together. And then in the future phases of our research and hopefully future workshops, we'll endeavor to focus on issues of importance to your communities and combine those insights from your community with our areas of specialization. So that's how we're going to proceed now. So with that, I would ask the host to launch the polls, and we will take it from there. So you should see in a moment a question come up. The first question is about hazards that have been an impact in your community previously in the last few years. So click up to 3 or more if you'd like. And then the second question is about hazards that you're concerned about in the future for the sake of your community. We'll just give it another little bit, give everybody a chance to think about these questions. All right, we're at about a 70% response rate, so we'll maybe just give it a few more seconds. All right, now we're going to launch the second poll. All right, we're at a 70% response rate, so we'll just give it a few more seconds. And I apologize if I'm rushing anybody. We are just keen to get to the breakout and hear from everybody. All right, we've hit 80%, so let's take a look at the poll results. All right, so you should see on your screen now the results. We're seeing a very high indication of concern over extreme heat, as well as flooding and issues of food security and severe winter weather. So as a reminder, this was impacts in recent years. We can then also take a look at the second question. So these are now the hazards of concern for the future, and we're seeing a very similar pattern. However, I'm noting from the chat that there was some concern that the polls were the same. So my apologies if this didn't come across very clearly. The questions were very similar. The first poll was about sort of concerns from previous years, hazards that have affected your community in previous years. And the second poll was about concerns you have for the future, or about hazards that might impact you in the future. So again, apologies for that. Maybe we can talk a bit more about these things in the breakout rooms. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Ian and Brett to talk a little bit about the breakout rooms.
All right. Thank you, Dave. It was great to hear the presentations kind of highlighting the OCAP principles, because data sovereignty is hugely important to when talking about research on communities, but also the comments about regulations and how they play a big role in what we're able to do. Historically, more recently, the communities have been kind of predetermined on what they're able to do with regards to cultural practices because of past regulations that are currently still active related to controlled burns, things like controlled burns and managing fisheries, and how those kind of play a role in general to what we were able to do in communities. So again, moving into this next breakout session, I just kind of like to highlight, Ian, did you want to share are we sharing the slide here? So again, thank you for the great presentations. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of highlight is that we're here to listen. We're in the beginning, as they said, in building the relationships, and we're here to honor the communities and values and insights, and try to couple that with the technical and Western academic expertise. I say Western academic expertise because, you know, to develop resiliency in this changing climate, it's kind of also about respecting that the term in academia and the perspective of academia, it goes both ways, and that we do have our own knowledge systems. The Gitxsan people have our Guaxians and our Yushlamach that are part of our inherency and part of our rights and our education system. So pedagogical views are very important and key to contribution. So again, thank you for joining us, and we're here to be listening to everybody here. And then I'll pass it over to Ian to kind of go over the breakout room sessions and what we're going to be doing and the questions that we'll be asking.
Great, thank you, Brett, and thank you, everyone. We're ready to go into the breakout room. So the questions that are kind of initially being framed: what are the climate change concerns in your communities, to kind of build on what Dave presented in the poll? What are the ways this research project can help increase climate resilience in your community? So what are the specific things, you know, that a collaboration like this could support and enable in terms of really kind of pushing the envelope on actually increasing resilience? And then the things that, you know, your community would like like us to know as a kind of research team around, you know, the considerations for partnership and those kinds of things. And so we're asking that when you get put into a breakout room, one of the participants volunteers to kind of report back So we're going to need somebody to report back, and there's a window of time, probably a quick minute at the end of this session to kind of give a flavor for what was discussed. And so we appreciate your time. This is where we want to hear from people, and we're ready to kind of send folks out into the breakout rooms. Remember to identify that kind of volunteer to kind of report back. And these are the questions that you can kind of start with in terms of your conversation. So thank you so much for sharing your time and ideas and wisdom with us as we kind of go to this next stage of the workshop. And we'll send it to Olivia to break us out.
Thanks, Ian. I'm ready with the breakout rooms. Here we go. Hi, Janice.
Hello.
Hi. Let me just turn on my camera.
My internet is really not good right now. I just got disconnected.
Oh no, sorry to hear. So were you here right before the breakout room?
I was in the other one and
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so how about I just pop you back in and then hopefully the internet connection stays.
yeah,
Okay, let me just
I think I was in 6.
in number 6? Okay, no problem. I can just pop you back in there. Okay. Okay, do you have a notification to join? Hi, Rod. Hi, Rod.
Hi, Louie. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thanks. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this to my headset here.
To the headset? Are you having issues with your audio?
Sound to the headset. Just Zoom. It's different.
So you can't hear, like the volume's low?
No. I can hear, but I'm in a public place. I need to mute.
Oh,
sound.
I see.
You try just something on audio, just a quick word.
Hi, can you hear me?
Still.
Oh, so the sound is coming out of your computer instead of the headset?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so there in the bottom right hand corner where the microphone is, there's a little up arrow. I don't know if you see that beside the little microphone.
Beside the mute button.
Yeah, the mute button.
Okay.
And then so then it probably gives you a list of
There we go. I
selected
got it now.
speakers. Okay.
Yeah.
All good?
All good. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks.
No problem. So right now we're in breakout rooms. Did you want to enter?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I never find that it really kind of goes well with that.
Okay. So then we're in there for half an hour. So
Oh,
we'll be.
they're there for half an hour. When did it start?
Mhm. It started, what's on my timer, 9 minutes ago.
Okay. Is there a kind of a lean group there, one that's not really?
A lean group. They're all pretty much the same number. It's
Okay.
pretty even.
All right. How many people per room?
There's 9 or 8.
Oh, that's plenty then. If I show up now, it's
Mm.
just gonna throw things back at the beginning.
Oh, Ian is
The-
coming on. So- Hi, Ian. There was an issue or you got disconnected? Hi, Ian.
Olivia.
Were you disconnected?
Well, I just tried to leave the room and it actually made me leave the whole session.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't move around. One thing, just while we're here together, can we send a reminder to participants that the report, like that there's 10 minutes left in 1 minute? Is there a way to send that through to everybody?
Yeah, I can do a broadcast.
Yeah, at 11:45, basically, we're coming just so they know the timing of this.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let me just put the broadcast out.
I didn't say it in the preamble to this.
Oh, sorry. So 10 minutes. And to please select report back, or
Yeah.
did you want me to remind them to choose someone to report back?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Hello, Rod.
Hey, Ian, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Seems to be going well.
Oh, that's good. Sorry, yeah, I'm in and out a little bit, just trying to juggle 500 things,
Yeah.
and never easy when traveling.
Yeah, no, I hear you. No, it went with the intro there. Everything kind of seemed to land, and the breakout rooms are going well. So, Olivia, if I jump back into the breakout rooms, and I hit, it says leave room, and then when you hit leave room, you actually have to hit a hard leave at the end, and I came right back out and had to log back in. So,
Oh, okay. So I think there might be 2 options. There's one that's leave meeting and one that's leave room. So that's weird. I chose the options so that you can switch, but I'm not really sure what's going on.
that's
So
okay. If I can go back into one of the rooms and I'll kind of float around. If I come back here, then that's just what happens.
Okay, sure. I'll put you in room 4. You're in room 104. Okay.
Sure.
Here we go.
Thanks.
Okay, you should have a request there.
And Olivia, I see a whole bunch of folks that just showed up. Have they been around for a while and just not assigned, or do you know, or people just signed in and out?
No, so they were here before the breakout room, but they didn't accept the invitation to join.
Okay.
So I messaged them if they needed assistance, but they didn't get back to me.
Okay. Like many of us, multitasking, no doubt.
It's the theme.
Yes. Have you been pulled into any of the conversations around business transformation at all?
I have not.
You're muted right now.
Oh, I am. I'm muted.
No, it just went silent on your mic.
No, I have not been pulled
Oh,
into the
that's what happened. Sorry,
conversation.
my bad. There we go.
Oh, the volume.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. The volume went silent.
No, I have not been pulled into those conversations. I've only been updated from the why am I forgetting the word? The semi-annual, or not semi-annual, but the meetings, the big ones.
Right. Yeah, the General
Mhm.
Assembly type meetings.
Exactly. Yeah. Have you been quite involved?
Not deeply involved, but like 70% of the items related to transformation touch on Indigenous relations in one way, shape, or form. So can't avoid. Well, I get pulled into a lot, like how it's working now is like there's we're kind of operate as an advisory group adjacent to BC Housing. So whenever someone asks for our support, that's when we come in. There's not very much that we actually take the lead on. But you know, all the folks that are doing the business transformation, they're going through their own process. And then
Mhm.
at points, they'll just kind of say, oh yeah, what about Indigenous relations? What's your view on this? And there's a handful of other folks that are in similar capacity at similar volumes.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, we get pulled into a lot of the conversations at some point. And
Mm.
each point we get pulled in a different level based on who it is, what it is, that kind of thing.
Oh, I see. So I can imagine that might be a little bit difficult to find to
Wow,
have
that's
some
the
sort of
second time it's done that.
continuity.
Sorry, it keeps, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, this is hysterical. I've got this headset and
Uh-huh.
I was leaning on it and it was leaning on the negative button that was turning it
Yeah.
down. I was like, oh, you keep turning yourself down.
Yeah,
Oh,
what's going on? I know you got to be careful. There's so many options. It's up here, down here on the computer. So many different options for volume. Sorry, no, I was just saying, do you find that difficult to find like some sort of continuity if you keep getting, or is it, you know, appropriate amount for you? How do you feel about that?
yeah, you know, it's interesting. You know, it was pretty clear we needed to make some substantive changes to our processes and to ensure that the transparency was there in a much greater way.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the other thing is that the volume of things that touch on Indigenous relations in one way, shape, or form has really increased.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good time for. I mean, business transformation comes at a good time for me too, just because we're looking at reconciliation already and
Mm-hmm.
doing so much in that space and trying to keep it all coordinated. So it's good. It's just, wow, it'd be so much nicer to have the additional resources to support the ongoing work
Yeah.
on top of the transformation items that
Yeah.
clearly they need to be done, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's another theme across BC Housing, right? The call for more resources, the call for more support.
Yeah,
And yeah.
absolutely. And has Di given her official notice yet, or is she still just talking about retiring at some point?
She has not told me herself that she's given her official notice. Like you said, there have been talks. I wouldn't be surprised if she gives it in very soon, if not, if she hasn't done it yet.
Right.
But yeah, if you contact her, I'm sure she'd tell you. And you know, she loves to chat, or she loves to connect, especially with you.
Oh, she does, yes. And I enjoy chatting with her. And it's been far too long, but you know, just the pace of
I know. Mm-hmm.
of everything is way too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, that's another thing, right? Everyone feels very overwhelmed, burnt out, like from a scale, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you doing?
I'm good. I mean, I think from my perspective, I get to do I'm really happy that, because some people feel so burnt out, but then they are happy to go to the training, so they make that time, and I feel happy to be a part of that, and you know, something that they can look forward to. So it's been really nice.
Yeah.
There's a lot of new hires. So part of the training we dole out are mandatory trainings, right? And so I can see there's so many people getting hired. And just the rate of the growth of BC Housing is incredible, like very. And then it's kind of this weird dichotomy. It's like we need more resources, we need more support, but at the same time, I see there's so much hiring going on. Hopefully there meets some sort of equilibrium, you know?
Yeah, well, it started with the operational review where it was like we're 300 people short on the operational side of what we're doing. It's like, are you kidding me? 300 people? That's
Yeah,
an
it's
awful lot.
Yeah.
So
I know.
yeah, and so now it's now right sizing all the other kind of branches of the commission to make sure we're proportional to what the expectations are. So
Yeah, I
and
know. And
it's I know for our team, we've in the past year we've added 2 people, and we have been approved for 3 more, but we're going to be asking for 5.
Oh, wow.
Like, so you know, 2 additional on top of that, and maybe more, depending on the volume of what IHF creates. I think the maximum size that we could be potentially looking at for the Indigenous Relations team, which is currently 3, if Vince buys into the plan that I've kind of got, then we're going to be, you know, a team of 1, 2, 3, 5, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a team of 10.
Wow.
Team of 10, or actually 12. Team of 12.
Oh my goodness, that is insane. I mean, it's great, but that's
So that's you know, that's probably the max size that we'd be justified at. But you know, I can certainly, you know, and I have made the business case, like, you know, there could be 12 of us doing this work.
Sorry, do you have Microsoft Teams open?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Just to let you know, I just realized I looked at the thing.
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. But sorry, I'm just trying to go back to our previous conversation. But yeah, no, that's really good news to hear that, you know, it's on the docket and you know, it's working on it. I mean, but sorry, I got a little distracted. You're proposing additional, or it's already in the docket?
Well, it's proposing to kind of, you know, say, okay, here's some, we operate advisory right now. What it would look like to be something a bit more proactive, and then, you know, ultra proactive, and then how to really kind of outreach and how to make sure we're doing things really, really well. So it's the first, one of the first things you kind of learn in the policy space is how to write options analysis. You always have to include do nothing, and then you always have to include when I did it, they called it the Cadillac version, but I think, you know, Cadillac is not necessarily the platinum standard anymore. The gold standard becomes the platinum standard now, and so forth. So
right.
Yeah.
Hi, Olivia. So I was just in one of the sessions, and the timer says that there's still like 10 minutes left.
Yeah. Sorry, I wrote 10 minutes left before, but I meant to say 10 minutes have passed. Sorry, I was chatting and typing at the same time. But I just messaged the group that there's 10 minutes left.
But isn't it the program I have says that we end at noon entirely, and that the report back is 11:45.
I have here. Oh, interesting. Okay, you're right. I have in my notes 30-minute breakout room.
Yeah, I know, but it went late though, right? The presentations went late.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me just.
I don't think we want to, Rod, what do you think? I don't think we want to carry this on past the time we said, right? Just
yeah, we have to
respect people's time.
We can carry on for a little while because it is lunchtime, but like, you know, some band offices will close and lock the door. Like, you have to be out by noon.
Okay, let me send a message that we'll be wrapping up. I'll give them 3. Can I say 3 minutes? It's 47. So 3 minutes.
Yeah, the report. Maybe 2 minutes, 1 minute. Like, we're getting tight here. Maybe 1 minute. I think the session I was in, they were wrapping up.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 minutes is probably, that's, I think you might need to give them just a little bit, because there's going to be some folks that are going to be. Or you can say 11:50, we need to jump off.
Okay.
Latest.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me tell the group.
Yeah, I've been trying to follow the schedule here, right? And so we said 30-minute breakouts, but we were 10 minutes late.
Yeah.
Only 10 minutes, that's not bad.
Yeah, it's good. And that one group was like through the questions, like they were the one I was in, they were done.
Okay. Okay, so it's 11:50. I'm gonna broadcast that we'll be closing the breakout rooms, and I'll let them back in here.
Perfect. To the special guest speaker, Rod Hill.
No. No.
I haven't met you, Rod, before in person, but I like joking around.
Yeah, no, I try to get out of speaking as much as possible. It happens way too often. I get sick of listening to my own voice, frankly.
Yeah.
I get the need for having to do it. And when I give the information, people are kind of like, kind of overwhelmed with the volume of data that accompanies the presentations. So clearly there's an appetite for it, but I get so sick of listening to my own voice. I'd much sooner defer to others.
We've got the team coming back here. Right, looks like everybody's kind of more or less back. Thank you, everyone. I bounced around and there were some really incredible conversations, and just to be respectful of the timeline to kind of wrap by noon, we wanted to kind of jump into those report backs. And obviously we want to kind of do that fairly quickly, and knowing that this is the beginning of the conversation, right? It's not possible to have covered all the issues in depth. And so if maybe some of the facilitators or the people that volunteered to kind of report back can kind of jump in there, we'll kind of go around to the different groups. And Marcy, did you have a person that you had volunteered or had ready for your group?
I was prepared to volunteer myself. That's the easiest. So we were in breakout room 4. Oddly enough, there was some connections there that went back 20 years. I had a really valuable session with the folks that were sharing that space with me. Leo, Gina, Mike, Jackie, Charlene, I want to thank you all for your feedback. We discussed that everything's really connected. So it might start out with a heat dome that leads to enhanced fire conditions. The fire will burn off all the trees and the ground structure that holds water, which leads to floods in the spring. All these things culminate together, leading to food insecurity, change of landscape, and we know that everything is connected. And I think that's one of the really big takeaways from our conversation, that people living in those spaces at direct mercy of these, climate events just go from one tragedy or one event to the next. And so, there's a lot to it. There's also, we spoke about the Community Energy Association, the need for building capacity in communities for us to collaborate. Access to inspectors, access to builders is a big one. The codes sometimes create complexity, maybe barriers to providing alternative and intuitive and resilient housing practices and technology practices. We need to get into the details for design for climate resiliency. And, the province really needs to be going to First Nations communities as the subject matter and land experts in the course of, forest fires and different climate events. Indigenous communities know the lay of the land. They know where the resources are to fight fires, to build up barriers, to do all the things for diking and all that strategies for fighting climate events. They are the experts. They know the land. We've lived here forever, time immemorial. And so really the province and all of the crews need to be consulting with First Nations communities first. And, and providing them in lockstep at the beginning in partnership, there's a lot of knowledge there to offer. Elders have predicted a lot of the climate events way back in the day. We need to listen, we need to build trust, and we need to acknowledge the wisdom and not just, I guess, pay lip service to the feedback that we're hearing.
Wow. Building on that, Nikki, did you want to jump in there with your group?
Sure. And we had Sharon and Connie and Todd and Lori. I think Lori Stahl stepped off right now, and Stephen. And they had some really great points in the group. We talked about the issues, first of all, the fire, the dryness, the fact that the snowpack leaves sooner, especially up north in the Fort St. John area. There's fires already up north. The fire season has started earlier. And then the fact that the training and the capacity for land code and all of the things surrounding that, something that's really important and that would contribute to helping communities build up after they have these disasters, climate related disasters and whatnot. So it showed a need for that. And just that collaboration, working together so that you can change policy, change funding opportunities, not having a one size fits all, but being able to be adaptable with those kinds of things so that you can actually build up a community to be more climate resilient.
And any of the other kind of volunteers for report backs want to jump in there, building on what was said with the other ones?
Yeah, Richard Joseph. One thing that was noted is 20 years ago, 30 years ago, the temperature stayed fairly consistent. You had the cold season and the warm season. Now the warm season had jumped by a good 10 degrees from Smithers, Hazelton area, from 25 highs to 35 highs. And houses were built poorly to deal with that back then. And now they're having issues trying to deal with that kind of a temperature swing. So that was one of the big takeaways. And Marie Baptiste put a note in the section where the notes are added, and she summed up a lot of the stuff already, so I won't go into that.
Thank you, Richard. Any other quick report backs, wanting to kind of respect that noon is coming around the corner here?
Sure, I'll be quick. I was the note taker and presenter for Group 6. We had Richard, John Hall, Dre Azik, Rachel McKay, Martina Lewis, Janice, and Rachel Alexander in our group. I think a lot like Marcy's Group 4, we talked a bit about the interconnections, how there can be wind, flooding, fires, heat, but then how those interconnect with wildlife, health, safety, food security, access to resources, and the need, there was talk of need for housing design that's culturally appropriate, creates energy efficiencies, that cuts energy costs, because it sounds like there's a lot of codependency with fossil fuels in many of these communities. So to reduce expenses for the community and to be more carbon neutral, there's a need for better housing design in that regard, and a need for information on how to implement this. And also information and resources on how to move from reactivity to crisis to more proactive, preemptive solutions. And I'll end there. I hope I got it, most of it. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other quick report backs? And then I think we'll get Nancy to kind of let us know where we're heading, and then Brett can maybe end us off in a good way.
Yeah, I was in Nancy's group in the breakout room. I was with Nancy, Gail, Reeve, Deborah, Leslie, and Patrick. The first comment that was made in the group was that the time for talking so much has to come to an end, and we have to actually start making solutions and really acting. There was a lot of great discussion in the group, so thank you all for sharing space and all your comments. There was a lot of talk about wildfires as well, and air quality, and what communities are doing to to help that, like with prescribed burns, clearing up any sort of fuel that will add to the fire. They talked about the problems of being rural and remote with having only one road where people can get into or get out, and what happens if that road is closed. So part of discussions about resiliency also surrounded, how people will be able to stay in their houses and stay in their communities, the need for water. We talked about how water is extremely important, and how people have to have water plans, and not just water plans for the next 10, 20 years, but for the next 100 years. And yeah, just the ability to bounce back when people don't want to or cannot evacuate. So the need for water, food, and shelter, and to just really prioritize that, so that people will be able to stay in their communities in case of any disasters. And we did cover a lot more, but that just sort of sums it all up. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you for being part of the virtual circle, everyone. And maybe we can, just to respect time, go to kind of Nancy in terms of potential next steps, and then Brett can kind of head us out.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your wisdom and for sharing. I'll be very, very brief. Next steps are we will get back to you with what, for everyone who signed up, with what we heard today. We are pooling all of our note-taking and efforts to respond back to you. If any of you if any of you would like to speak to us on your own, please contact, you have Nikki's contact. Mine is in the, I believe is somewhere in there. It's just my last name at sfu.ca, OLEWILER. Please reach out to us. Inez has just put it in the chat. Please reach out to us in any way, but we will get back to you. If you have ideas of how we can serve and communicate better, please let us know. But we'd like to carry on, and in the words of many people, it's already too late, but we're going to try to make up for time and see where we can provide not just support, but action. Back over to you, Ian, and to Brett.
Yeah, Brett, why don't you kind of pick that up, and thanks, everyone.
Again, thanks everyone for participating. This was a really great session to kind of kick off that relationship building component to this. One of the things that I kind of picked up on throughout the process was the, needing to strengthen First Nations ability for self-determination and self-determined ways of managing and building their own capacity, whether it comes to homes or infrastructure within their communities. Also, each community is at different levels of preparedness, so some will need a lot more support than others when it comes to preparing for this new changing climate. And then also kind of looking at food security versus food sovereignty. I think it's kind of essential to differentiate and what the difference between food security and food sovereignty. So security is being able to access that food. Where are we able to access this resource? And then food sovereignty is how can we create our own resource in the times that we don't have that ability to access it. So differentiating and also supporting that on various levels. So I think it was really great first step. And I think everyone's information, again, it's really important that everyone contributes. So if you, again, like Nancy said, if you want to contribute and you just didn't have time to talk, or you didn't feel like speaking at this time, you wanted to collect your thoughts, again, you can connect to them, and you're more than welcome to share some of your thoughts afterward. And thank you so much for everyone, again, for lending us your eyes, your ears, and your time.